So what we are talking about today is the process tools, how to document a process, how to use the basic functionality on the process tools page. Just a quick reminder, anybody who's new to the technical training series, your phones are on mute right now, which just means that we can't hear you. So if you have a question, you can type it into the chat log, which is in your GoToMeeting screen, or you can ask me to unmute your phone, which I'm happy to do as well. All right, so let's talk about first how you get to the process tools page and how you set about to start to document a process. So the first way I'm going to show you is through the 4 key functions. So if we go to one of the 4 key functions over here in the navigation, then you're going to see a list of processes. Now you'll only see the list of processes if you've put processes on your 4 functions list. So to add a process, it's just this little button right here, and that allows you to add a new process to the system. Once a process is added, when you select it, it's going to take you to the process tools page, which is this screen that we're on now. So this is where all of the documentation is created for that process. Another way to get to a process is through the organization chart. So if I click the organization chart here, now I'm going to see all the positions that I've created on my chart. And if you have built your job descriptions, which means you've linked processes from the 4 functions list here to boxes on the chart, then when you select that box, you're going to see all those processes you linked. And if you choose a process from the job description, it will, again, take you to the process tools page. From this breadcrumb trail we're seeing right here, I can see where this process is on the 4 key functions. So it's in the doing the business function, in the client service sub-function, and then we see the process. There's a button right above this screen right here called Link to Job Description. With this button, if I select it, I'm going to be able to see which job descriptions I linked this process to. So you see them in orange right here. So this is on the manager's job description, it's on the customer service, it's also on the service manager. From this view, I can link it and unlink it as well. So if I want to take it off the service manager, I just select it, and now you can see it's not orange anymore, which means it's off that job description. If I want to add it to a job description, it's the same thing. I just select it. TouchStone's going to ask if I want it in the strategic or the tactical section of the job description, and then I hit link. And then you can see that it's orange again, which means it's on that job description. So the 4 key functions in the org chart through the job descriptions are this kind of circle. It's here on the 4 functions, and then it's also linked to a position on the org chart. So again, this is called the process tools page. The first thing you see when you click a process is what we call the details of the process, which is right here in this blue box. So what the details are there, it's the title, of course, and then it's the objective, which is right underneath the title. If you want to edit either the title or the objective, it's just click and it opens for you to edit. And then you need to cancel or save. The objective is the same thing. If I click here, it's going to open, and then I can create the objective or edit the one that's there, and then it's cancel or save. The objective is meant to be the purpose of the process. So it's usually a sentence or a phrase which describes what is in this process, why does it exist, what's the overall result of it, what's the purpose of it. These objectives are important because if I should be able to read this and know what's inside of this process, which is important for somebody if it's on their job description. It also can become important when you haven't documented the process yet, because through the objective, you can kind of decide for yourself what's the scope of this process, where is it going to start and where is it going to end, what's inside of it. Right below the objective, there's this button right here called Process Documentation Completed. This will turn, if it's selected, it'll turn the color of the process black, and it'll put a little check mark next to it. And you want to check this off when you're done with the process, so the documentation is finished. So if we go back here to client service, you can see from my process list, this one is complete. So I've filled in that little box and it's got a little check mark and it's black. This one, on the other hand, is red because there's nothing in it yet. So the documentation hasn't been started. There's no work plans, there's nothing in it yet, it's just a title. This one is blue because it's got some documentation in it, so somebody's working on it or it's been started, there's something inside of it, one of the tools inside of it has been used, and that lets you know that it's in process or it's begun. And then here again, when you're finished with the documentation, you fill in the little box called Process Documentation Completed, and then it turns it black. I can also uncheck this box. So if somebody checked it and then somebody else looks at it, like the manager, and says, no, this isn't done, or you want to change something to it, you just uncheck it. It's all manual. And then if we go back here, you'll see that the process is blue again. Right underneath Process Documentation Completed, there's this button too that says Make Process Public and Available to All Users. So the public folder lives on the dashboard. It's right here. And you want to put processes in the public folder that are the accountability of every position. So they're company-wide information. They're not on one or two people's job descriptions. They're for the entire company to have access to and be able to use and see the information inside of it. So typical things in the public folder are going to be like HR processes, like the employee handbook, management philosophy, any kind of development meetings you have that have, content that you've given trainings on. Sometimes you have like an in-service. You can put all that information here. Key performance indicators, like if every employee needs to track their indicators. Communications, this is like how to answer the phone, how to send emails, stuff like that. There's going to be a whole session on the public folder, or part of a session, where I'll talk more in detail about how to use the public folder. I'm just going to hit the browser's back button and we're going to go right back to this process. So over to the left here are all of the templates, or we call them tools, that you have available to document with. The first tool is called a work plan. It's right here at the top. A work plan is just a step-by-step set of tasks or instructions on how that work is done. Every process, maybe with some exceptions, but almost every process should have a work plan, because that becomes the training. It becomes the details, the clear, succinct information on how that process is run. Mainly used for training purposes and also for reference. Processes can also have a checklist, which is this tool right here. And the checklist is for quality control, for verification. Processes can have scripts. So scripts are for documenting a conversation or frequently asked questions. Anytime a process has a verbal interaction in it, so someone has to say something or answer a question verbally, then you know you need the script tool, because it's a great template to document a conversation in. There's an uploaded files tool, which allows you to upload documents to TouchStone. So if a process has a spreadsheet or a PowerPoint presentation or a PDF manual of some kind or a complicated Word document with links, and you need it to be in the original software format it was created in. So that's the key about the uploaded files. If you need it to stay as a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet or a PDF or a PowerPoint, then use the uploaded files tool to upload that whole document. The document tool, and I'm going to show you I'm going to show you more details about how these tools work when we get into each of the tools, but I'm just doing a highlight right now of all of them. The document tool right here is kind of like a blank Word document. That's why we call it the document tool. So when I click here and open this up, you're going to see it kind of looks like a blank Word document. So you want to use this tool when you need to put in text, because this is can be like free-flowing text right here. You can build a table using the table building row right here, just like you would in Word. You can insert an image, a picture right here, if you want it to be big, like 8.5 by 11. So the document tool is kind of like a catch-all for any information you need to be in the process, which doesn't fit into the other process tools for whatever reason. I'm going to cancel this. The custom form tool is for building custom forms. If you need information about what happened in the process while somebody was doing it, so someone needs to answer questions, or they need fillable fields to make notes or put in details about what happened when they were running this process, then you can use the custom form tool. It's also great for building tests. So this is a test for an employee on the customer complaint process itself. So you can sit an employee in front of the dashboard and you can have them study the process, and then they can complete this test. And that demonstrates to you for a new employee that they have understood the process. These custom forms are great, are used on the dashboard. You can always print them, but they're good used on the dashboard because they're web forms. So this field here will get bigger as I type information into it. There's a policy tool, which is down here. And the policy tool allows you to document really essential, important policies regarding the process. So things that are legal, compliance, safety related, anything that you really need the employee to understand that's important that they follow the rule. There's also a video uploader, which is here, where you can shoot training videos with your phone even, and then upload them to TouchStone. And then there's an audio tool as well, which is an MP3 file. So it's not a video file, it's just a voice file. So that's like a quick highlight into all the tools. In this session, we're going to specifically talk about work plans and checklists in detail. Next week, we'll go through the rest of the process tools, and I'll explain more about how and when they're used. So let's go back to this work plan. To make a work plan, you just click the title right here where it says Work Plans, and then you're going to be prompted for the name of your work plan. So all the tools work the same way. If I wanted to build a checklist, I'd click the title. Now I'm prompted for the name of my checklist. Script, same thing. So let's go back to Work Plans here. So you'd put in the title of your work plan. Then you put in the objective. What's the purpose of it? Sometimes the titles of a process are just so obvious that in the work plan, this isn't all that important. But if it's something that's not clear through the title, then make sure you fill in the objectives. And then you just hit Create Work Plan. And now you'll see over to the left here, I've got this new work plan here, in addition to these other two. If I want to edit the title of almost anything inside of TouchStone, it's click to edit. So if I click this, it's going to open, and then I can edit or change the title. Same with the objective. This doesn't have an objective, so it shows up in gray, but when I select it, it opens, and I could put in the objective. Up here to the top are a series of icons which have to do with the process tools. If I want to get back to the details of a process, so that's the screen that we saw when we first selected the process, I can click this and it'll take me back to the title of the process, the objective, this whole field here. So that's what it means by edit process details. It takes you back to the name and the purpose of the overall process. So I'm going to click back on this work plan. So that's edit process details, always take you back there. This icon will take a work plan and turn it into a checklist. So if I click this, it's going to say, are you sure you want to convert this into a checklist? I would say, okay. And then you can see down here under the checklist header, this work plan has been made into a checklist. So all TouchStone did was take the tasks of the work plan and put them next to checklist boxes right here. So this is kind of a cool feature, because if you need a quality control checklist for the process, oftentimes it's just the tasks that somebody follows. And then you can, with one click, turn it into a checklist. And then here on the dashboard, someone could log in, access that checklist, and fill it out and save it back to TouchStone. So let's go back here now. So that's convert to checklist right here. This icon will allow you to move a process tool from one process to another. So you want to use this when you maybe built two processes and then you decide you want to combine them. That's a reason that people would use this tool. So I could take this checklist out of this process and move it into another. Sometimes the opposite is true. You've built a process and you've got a lot of stuff going inside of it, and then you decide to break it apart. So you could add another process title and then move some tools from that one process to another. Another reason to use this tool is in dealing with our library processes. So I'm going to go back to the 4 key functions here for a second and give you a demonstration of that. So here's guiding the business. Under here, we have a process called Employee Performance Review. I talked about this one last week. So let's say you have your own performance review process, but you also downloaded ours from the library right here. And you decide, you look at ours, and you decide, boy, I really like this policy, or I really like this evaluation form. So you can take tools from ours using this toolbar item right here, Move Process Tool, take it out of the library process, move it into your own, and then delete the library process. So what this looks like when I select it is I'm going to see a drop down here, and then these are all of my sub-functions from my 4 functions list. So I'm basically looking for the process that I want to move this form into. So I choose the sub-function that it's in, and then I hit the drop down. I would choose my own performance review process, or the one that you want to move it into, and then you hit save. So then TouchStone has just moved that file out of this, or Workplan, or whatever it is, into that other process. If you use this feature and then you look at the process you thought you moved it into and it's not there, typically it's because you chose the wrong process to move it into and you feel like it's just lost. So if that ever happens, go up to the search right here in the upper right-hand corner. Here you can search for anything inside of TouchStone. Type in the name of that tool, hit search, and you'll see the process it was moved into. Okay, let's go back to the customer complaint process. I'm going to go back to this work plan. So that's Move Process Tool. This icon is our export feature. So this tool will print or export anything inside of TouchStone. And you'll see this icon all throughout TouchStone. When you select it, you have an option to print, which will open up your printer settings, and then that tool will get printed from your own local printer. You can export it to Word. TouchStone will launch Word and show you the document in Word. You can print to a PDF, which PDF is the most kind of polished version. You want to export to Word when you want to maybe move things around a little bit, but if you just want to print it, PDF is is probably the best print solution, other than printing it directly, I suppose. And then you can email it as well. So that's the export feature. This next box over is our archive feature. So what the archive does is it allows you to keep versions of your processes, your process tools. So some businesses have a lot of compliance. Maybe if you're ISO 9000, or you're in an industry where there's oversight or audits that go on, and you've got to keep versions showing that you've improved your processes every year. So that's obviously a good reason to use the archive. If you don't deal with that kind of thing, a reason to use the archive would be to track how things have changed. So you might have a manager go in and update this customer complaint process, but you don't want to forget what it used to look like. So you can archive the tools inside of it and then have them go in and edit it and change it. And then you can always go back to the archive and restore things or look at them to see what's changed. Sometimes people like to keep our library processes. They like to archive the original version of it, and then you can edit and change it and make it your own. But then if you ever want to go back and restore what it was originally, you can do that. So to archive something, I would go here and edit the title of this, and I would call this version 1. And if you can spell that right. And then I'd save it. So now I've edited the title. Then I go to the black box icon here and click Archive. Okay. So now this version has been put in the archive. Then I would go back and just get rid of the version 1 because this is now the most current version. Now if I go to this View Archived right here and click it, then I'm going to hit the drop down and choose Workplans because that's what I archived. And now I'm going to see this version right here on this date and time. So I can click this and just view it, or I can hit this little arrow and it will restore it. So I hit Restore, and then you can see over here that this work plan has been restored and it has that version 1. So you don't have to edit the titles with the versions if you don't want to, but this makes it kind of easier to see the difference between this one and this one. So that's the archive. The black X is delete. So this will delete whatever tool is you're on. So what's behind us is this right now, this work plan. So if I hit the black X icon and I say okay, now this work plan has been deleted. If you ever accidentally delete something, you can go to View Deleted here. It acts like a big trash can inside of TouchStone. So if somebody accidentally deletes something or you do, you can always go to View Deleted and restore it right here. Another point about deleting is that only administrators can delete. So that delete button is not going to appear for other users. So administrators typically should know what they're doing, but sometimes everybody makes mistakes. So View Deleted is kind of a security for you. So let's go back here. So let's talk about how to make a work plan. So I just added this title here. Everything's drag and drop too. So I could drag this up and down and kind of get an order of these processes if I wanted to, or these work plans. So I can move these up and down. I'm just dragging and holding my mouse click down. So let's go back to this work plan. So if we were going to set about building this, the first thing we do is add a task. You click open the task field, and this is task 1. So I write out the first step, and then I save it. And then I hit add task again, click open the task field, and now this is task or step 2. Now I don't need to number these here because you can see they're numbering them automatically. I'm just doing that for example purposes. But this is the routine. You just set about going first step, second step, third step. This template kind of forces you into step by step by step because that's the best way to document. You want to think, what's the first thing that happens and all the details within that? What's the second thing that happens and all the details within that? And then force yourself to go to the next step. If we just wrote everything out in one task, you're kind of missing the benefit of the step by step. This toolbar is very similar to Microsoft Word. All these functions should look familiar. When you're cutting and pasting from a Word document into Word, use the text icon here or just do right-click, paste as text. That's another way to do it. By doing that, you'll insert the text in the TouchStone font and font size, which is 10-point Arial. If you don't do that, then you're going to cut and paste in different sizes and different font types. If that doesn't bother you, it's fine, but it just doesn't look the same because if I cut and paste in and then I start to just write in text here, this text is going to be, that you're seeing now, is going to be a different font and font size than the text you cut and pasted in. Now, you can always highlight and go to the font size in here and adjust it back to 10-point Arial, but it's better just to paste it as text. When your documents export, if you do choose to export them, it exports as 12-point Arial, which is more what we're all familiar with in documents. But in the web environment, 10-point Arial is a better viewing size for most monitors. There's a few special things about the toolbar. One is the hyperlink tool. So if I want to make a hyperlink, I would highlight the link word, and then I go to this little link chain right here, and I hit Insert Link. Now I'm going to see the link type drop down, and if I click this, I'll see all the different types. The first type is called an external link. So that would be a link to something else that lives on the internet. So when I choose this, it's asking me for a URL. So any web address you can cut and paste into here. So normally what I do when I'm inserting links to outside of TouchStone, I'd go to another page, and then I would highlight the URL, like up here. This is Infusionsoft. It's just our CRM tool. So I go up here and highlight, copy this whole URL, and then I go back to the hyperlink tool, and then I would paste in this URL, the whole thing. And then I hit Insert Link. Now this link word, when I click it, is going to take me to that page of my CRM. Now, as long as I'm past the username and password screen of that other tool outside of TouchStone, and it has to be a web tool, obviously, because it wouldn't have a URL if it was software. As long as I'm past the username and password screen, it's going to take me right to that screen of my other web tool. So the CRM in this example. So it's kind of cool to do these links if you're talking about steps inside of another piece of software, like go here to add a contact or go here to add notes, whatever your other software program is. As long as it's a web tool, you can put in links to those pages. Another type of link are things that are inside of TouchStone. So I'd highlight the word again, and I go to the link chain here. And now when I hit the drop down, I see things that are inside of TouchStone. So I could link from this task of a work plan to another process. So let's say there's information that I need inside of one process in order to finish another, which is common. The hyperlinks show the intersections between your processes. If you think of your business as a big flow chart, a massive flow chart with like boxes and arrows going everywhere, demonstrating how workflow goes from one place to another, the hyperlinks show that massive workflow, because I can see we're in the customer complaint process, and I'm on a step where I have to, let's say, enter notes into the CRM. I could make a link to my CRM how-to process that has a work plan on how to enter the notes in. So I would make a link to that as opposed to retyping in the tasks of how to enter a lead into the CRM. So think about these relationships. Think about the relationships between the process you're in to others that might exist in TouchStone. The hyperlinks eliminate against redundancy in your processes, and they also show the connections. You can also link to tools inside of the process itself. So we're in the guidelines process, or the processing one, and let's say there's a checklist right here that needs to be filled out at the end of this process, or in the middle of this work plan on how to process a customer complaint. Someone needs to fill out this form down here, giving information about what happened. Or they need to use a script when they're making a phone call. So in that case, in this task, I would link to the script. I'd say, use the customer complaint script, or fill out the customer complaint form. And then I would go to forms right here, and then I'd hit the drop down, and I see all of the forms that I have in TouchStone in alphabetical order. I'd go to the client complaint form and hit insert. So now this link right here is going to go to this form, and it just kind of points the person in the direction of what they have to do. There is also an image uploader which is different inside of this toolbar. So I started off by saying all these functions pretty much should look familiar to you, like bullets and sub-bullets and things like that. But the hyperlink tool is different, and also the image uploader. So the image uploader allows you to take screenshots and insert them into the tasks. I use this tool up here, and I showed this once before, but I'll show it again. It's called Jing. Everybody also has a snipping tool inside of their Windows operating system. This is the snipping tool right here. So if you're not on a Mac, this is what your snipping tool looks like, and you can go and search for it to find it. Macs have something different. I don't know what the name of it is, but they have their own snipping tools. But Jing is also a really great tool. So it's made by Smith Tech. It's free. You can download it for free. It works really well. I use it, probably 3 or 4 times a week. So the Jing tool will allow you to take screenshots. So it always shows up as a little sun right here. And if I hit this little plus sign where it says capture, then I'm going to see the image tool come up. These are the crosshairs that I'm just moving around here. So I put the crosshairs where I want the image to begin, and then I drag and take the little screenshot. And then when I hit this capture image button, it pops up like this. So it takes really cool little succinct images. You can also do arrows like that. Or you could make text boxes if you want to say something about it, about the image. You can highlight things like that. And then you can move it around once you've highlighted it. You can change the color down here to different things. When I take a screenshot in Jing or even in the snipping tool, I usually save these as pic. That's just what I use. You can use whatever word you want. Then I go save, and I save it to my desktop because that's the easiest place for me to find things. It usually defaults to that. And then once I save it, I hit save. Then I just go back to TouchStone, hit the image uploader, choose file. Then I type in the word pic right here and open. Oops, I'm not on my desktop. Open and then insert. And then there's the image. Now the next time I take a picture, I save it as the same thing. I save it as pic to my desktop, and then I go and it says, do you want to overwrite the last one? I say yes, and then I insert it again. So this way I'm not creating like 50 images on my desktop or even in my pictures folder. You don't need to keep them because now they're in TouchStone. Once the image is in, you can drag, make it smaller or bigger. I'm just holding my mouse click down and dragging it in and out. At some point, it's going to get too small for you to be able to see, but you can make it a little smaller. And then when I save it, that's what it appears like. So take pictures of things. It's a great way to show someone how something's supposed to look. I mean, you can literally take pictures with your phone and then upload those images, but these screen capture images are really a great way to do it as well. If I can show somebody what it looks like when they're learning it, then I can do less in the writing of it. All of these tasks are drag and drop too, so I can pull them up and pull them down. So the process tool types are drag and drop. Tasks are also drag and drop. The expectation section, which is right below the tasks, this is for anything extra you want to say about the work plan. So it could be a quality. It could be something subjective. It could be timing, when something's done, why something's done a certain way. So anything extra you want to say about the work plan that's not a part of the tasks, so it's not a part of the steps, then you can put it in the expectations section. And it works the same way. You save it, you can add another one. So this is the basic functionality of a work plan. So let's talk for a minute about what makes a good work plan. So first thing is, when you put in a process title, You want to then, you put in the title of that process right here. So this is the title. I'm back to the details again, the title, the purpose. Then you want to think to yourself, is there going to be multiple parts to this process? Are there multiple things that happen that all have different workflows? So this goes back to kind of what I was talking about in the first session in the 4 key functions. That conversation about what is a sub-function, what is a process, and what is a work plan inside of a process. So let's go to an example just so I can make this point a little clearer. So here in running the business, the accounts under finance, here it is, accounts payable. This is a pretty straightforward type of process that most people are familiar with, so it makes the point pretty well. So we're in the finance sub-function. Finance is a big category with lots of processes and maybe even lots of sub-processes within processes. Sub-function, process, work plans within a process. If we had a process called finance, so if I didn't have this as a sub-function, I just had a process called finance, that'd be way too big, right? Because I would have to have, there'd probably be 50 work plans in there. I don't know, that might be an exaggeration, but there'd be a lot of work plans. Same with like human resources right here. If I had a process called human resources, and then within it there was everything related to human resources, well, that's way too big of a process. There's too much going on. Also remember that processes are linked to job descriptions. So if I had a process called human resources, yet some of those processes were done by the admin finance manager, and some were done by managers, and some were done by just the marketing manager, well, then I'm linking one process to all those people's job descriptions with way too much going inside that they don't really need to know or have. It just becomes too complicated. So sub-function, and then we have process, like accounts payable. And when you select accounts payable, I've got numerous work plans in here. So the way that we deposit checks is a part of accounts payable, but depositing checks is way different. There's completely different tasks than for how we create invoices or how we make check payments or how we do bank deposits. So all the workflows for how to do everything related to accounts payable are defined here in these work plans. Now, I could have taken all these work plans and made them process titles, and it's certainly your prerogative to do that, but in my opinion, it just creates more processes on your 4 functions list, more things on people's job descriptions, and sometimes more means more complicated, not as easy to find, just more to deal with. So if you have like work, so things related to a process called accounts payable, put them in as work plans inside of that. So let's go back here to that customer complaint process. So the first thing you do, decide what work plans are going to be in the process. Think of the accounts payable one. What are the main things that happen? Is it just one series of tasks from top to bottom when handling customer complaints? Or are there multiple parts to it? If there are multiple parts, then define the work plans. Put them in first. Before you'd start documenting, put in the titles. If it's just one series of tasks from beginning to end, then the work plan itself, the only work plan in this process, use the same name as the process. So this is what it would look like. Imagine there's just going to be one work plan in this process. I would call this customer complaints. I have to put a 1 next to it because I have a duplicate. That's what this means. And it would just be this one. I'll move this at the top. So imagine these are all gone. The first work plan would be the same name as the process title. There's no reason to come up with a different name. If there's just one work plan, it's just the same as the process title. And the objective is the same too. But here again, if you're going to have multiple workflows, then define those work plans. Then set about building the work plan. So when you're building a work plan, the very first thing you want to think of, and I'm going to drag this to the top, is how does it start? So in this example, you want to think, how does the complaint begin? Like, how do we know somebody has complained? If it's an invoicing process, well, how do we know we need to invoice something? What information are we getting that causes that to happen? So think about, set the stage for it. How does the complaint come to you? And you don't write the task like that. Hopefully people get that. This is just for example. So this would say something like, the complaint will come in through the email, phone, or internet. So that's it. That's the first task. You're just explaining to someone. And then go to the second one. When they get it, what's the first thing they do? And then start listing out the tasks. You want to write your tasks like a list or like an outline. So you see this task right here that I'm on. This is a list. Locate the customer's invoice. I even have a hyperlink to an example of an invoice. If you can't locate the invoice, ask the customer what the number is and a copy of the invoice. Then you're going to gather the following information. Bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. This text right here, this task, is the same information that is in number 2 here. You see the difference, though, between this one and this one? This is written like a story. It's sentences upon sentences with commas in between, saying the same steps that this does. But I hope you can see that this is far easier to see with your eye. Like, I can see the steps of this much clearer than I can this. It's the difference between reading a story and then being able to recite the story and reading a list and being able to recite the list. It's much easier to remember a list than it is a story. So default to this type of documentation. Do away with the flowery language, the subjective things, the personal things like we do it this way or you do it this way. Make it very logical and clear with list type language. Put as much detail in as possible. So that's what typically makes a good work plan. First of all, it's written clearly, like in an outline, and it also has a lot of detail. Assume a minimum competency level of the employee. So this is how you tell if your work plan has enough detail or not. Think about the minimum qualifications or the minimum competency of that person doing that work. So this is a way to start something without putting too much detail in and then not putting enough. So what I mean by minimum competency or minimum qualification is think about before you hire that person, what do they already have to know? So this goes back to recruiting and hiring. So if I'm hiring a bookkeeper, the qualifications are she needs to, or he needs to know how to use Microsoft Office products. They need to know QuickBooks. They need to have 5 years of bookkeeping experience. So when I'm writing out my bookkeeping processes, I don't need to explain how to use QuickBooks unless your business is doing something different with QuickBooks, which is custom or unique to you. But the basic functionality, I don't need to explain all that in the work plans because that person should know that. But then the opposite is true. If you want to hire in somebody with less qualifications for less money most of the time, then you need to train them in what they do. You need to train them in how you do it. And your work plans need to be the training, so they're going to have that level of detail. So think about that situation in lower level positions, so entry level positions, that's a nicer way of saying it. Typically there needs to be more detail because you're training those people. In higher level positions, if you're recruiting and hiring correctly, you shouldn't really need to be able to put so much information in that person, your work plans can be simpler, is what I'm saying. So think about the minimum competency level. Remember to use the hyperlinks like this one. This is a link to the customer complaint form, which is right here. So we're just saying, if it's not a warranty issue, proceed to the customer complaint form, and there's just a link right to it right here. If it is not a warranty issue, and it's a simple job that was not done well, try resolving it with the providing a solution script. So this is a hyperlink to this script. So rather than putting in all the words of what they say into the task, I'm isolating it into the script and using this tool to do that. It's just easier for people to follow when they're learning. They can see the work plan being like the overall overarching list of things that happens, and then we're pointing to forms or scripts or other things that are needed or used. Here's a few example expectations. This is kind of a subjective thing. Every customer complaint will be heard with professionalism and an intent to resolve. Every customer complaint will be resolved within 24 hours. So any kind of timing thing, subjective thing, quality thing. So this is Workplans. So let's talk about checklists for a moment. So the checklist tool works the same way as the Workplans in terms of creating it. I just select the title, then I'm going to put in the name of the checklist. What's the name of it? It could be customer complaint checklist. So if there's only, one work plan in this process, there's just one clear thing that happens, you can name it the same as that first work plan. Then you hit create checklist, and now you can see I have a new checklist tool right here. Then I would go where it says add checklist item. So I click this, and it's going to give me the title and then a description. So the title is the text that is by the box. So the checklist box, this is the text that appears right next to it, the title. The description is, more details about it. So if you need to put in more details about how this main action occurs, then you can put it into this description field. And then when you save it, this is what it looks like. So the text right next to the box is the title, and the more details is right here. Then it would go to the next step, and then it's the same idea. So this is the second step, and this is the more details. And when I save it, it looks like that. If you don't have a description, then this will always be in gray. But when the checklist is used, preferably on the dashboard, you don't see this gray area if there's no description. I think with checklists, the description field, we added this because people wanted it, which is something we do every quarter when we have new releases. We'll add feature requests if enough people request it. But I just want to say about this description field, if you have a huge description on how to do one item in a checklist, I feel like that information belongs in the work plan. And it's because when somebody's filling out a checklist, they will read the title and they'll check it off, but they should know how to do that already. They should have learned it in the work plan or in the videos or the other documentation. All that detail should be there. If it's all in the checklist, it just becomes redundant, makes your checklist long, because when somebody is doing something rudimentary with a checklist, they're just going to go check, 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 did it, did it, did it. If they need to remind themselves of how to do checkbox number 2, they can go back to the work plan and read the details of how to do that. But here again, it's up to you how you want to document it. So checklist, pretty simple. This is all drag and drop as well. If I want to go back and edit something, I just click it and it's going to open to edit. This has an image uploader, but I don't think images should be in checklists. The images should be up here. The checklist isn't describing to someone how to do something. It's a reminder of what to do. So I'm going to cancel this. So just a few points about when and how to use checklists. If the process needs quality control, if it's very complicated and the employee themselves needs to track what they've done and what they haven't done, if you are dealing with some compliance or sensitive steps of something, and you may in the future have to go back and prove that that step was done. If you've got an employee that isn't learning very well, and as a manager, you don't want to be looking over their shoulder all the time, then that employee might need to be, you might require them to use a checklist for a certain period of time until they really demonstrate that they've got it. So any reason like that, then create a checklist. Either take a work plan like this one and turn it into a checklist like we did here, or build a checklist that looks like this. If you have, another reason for using a checklist is if you have a series of processes that have to be done in a certain order throughout the day or according to a project, you can build a quality control checklist for that purpose. So what you can do is, if I click Add Checklist Item, I could make a link to a process here, and I highlight it, and I go to the hyperlink tool, and I hit the drop down, and then I'm going to go to Process, and let's say that every day or every month on the 1st, I want the bookkeeper to do accounts receivable. Then I hit Insert, and then I hit Save. So now this could become like a monthly to-do list for the bookkeeper, and this is a link to accounts receivable. Now she could click this, or he could click this and go and remind themselves of how to do that process. But really what this kind of checklist becomes, it's like an overarching list of processes where I can just ensure every month the bookkeeper has done the bank rec, has done the accounts receivable, has done the collection calls, has submitted the reports, so it just becomes like this list as me as the owner of the company could look at every month and know that she did all those things. So remember, checklists can be something like that too. I'll show you another quick example of that. So here in Getting the Business, under Sales, which is where, there's a Sales to-do checklist, and I may have moved it. Let's go look at it this way. So I'm going to go to the dashboard and look at it. So here's my customer service person. And here's a daily to-do checklist. So when I click this, and then I open the checklist here, I see a list of the things she has to do. And these are all hyperlinked. You probably can't see them through the GoToMeeting, but this is a link to the warm lead selling process. This is a link to the sales follow-up. This is a link to contracts and proposals. This is a link to the referral process. So this checklist, just as it's checked off and saved, becomes a verification that these particular processes have been done when I want them done. So that's a variation on a checklist, which I think works well in some situations. So think about the purpose of the checklist before you create it. Why is it here? And sometimes it's good to put that into the objective of the checklist right here. It also is a reminder to the employee of why they're filling this out every time they're doing it. When employees typically don't follow processes, it's not necessarily because they're just insubordinate and lazy. Sometimes it's because they don't understand why that's important. So in a checklist in particular, you can get pushback on implementing new checklists because the employees view them as busy work that they're just kind of meant to do, and like, what's the point of it? If you tell them the point of it and you're clear on the point of it, then it takes on a whole new air of importance to everyone. So think about it. Is it for quality control, and why? Why do we need to track that every customer complaint has been handled, and at each step along the way, from beginning to end, we've tracked that it's been resolved, and how? Well, that sounds really important for customer complaints. So think of it in terms of what management information is needed by the company so that the manager can see what's happening without having to look at everything. without having to ask everybody all the time and interrupt all the time. So managers need quality control. One of your goals as a manager is to be able to manage the results that everyone is getting. Well, no manager can see everything that's happening unless they're running around watching everybody do it all the time and interfering in everything they're doing. It's a terrible way to be a manager. So what the manager needs is tools like checklists. So I need tools to make sure that my employees are following the steps they need to. Now, a manager knows that employees aren't getting the results when there's a problem, but it's too late then, right? And that takes so much energy to deal with. So this is just a way to talk to your employees about it, that you need a way to view what's happening without having to be there doing it and seeing it all the time. So on the dashboard, this is a great place for employees to use checklists. So here, I'm going to click on this position. If I was the manager of marketing and sales, when I log into TouchStone, this is what I would see. I would see my employees down here, but I'd go to my own checklist. And let's say as the manager, I'm responsible for handling customer complaints. I click this process. When there's a lot of tools inside of a process, like there is this one, and all I really need to use is the checklist, I always collapse it. It just makes it easier to look at. So then I would go to the checklist. I'd click it. I'd put in the client's name right here that I was dealing with. I can put in notes about extra things that happened, and then I would go and just check off that I did these things. Doesn't take very long, and then I save it. Now it's date and time stamped with the date and time that this was done. Once it's saved, I can print it right here if I want to. It creates a PDF is what's happening really with the checklist. So I could save this electronic version by downloading it. It's just a PDF, or I could print it. So once it's saved back to TouchStone, I can always view it. I'm just going to collapse these again because, again, it's easier to see in this example because there's so many tools in here. And then I could go here to the checklist, and I can see it right here in the completed folder, what I've done. I could go back to it and add more to it, or I could go here and run a report. So checklists are great, completed in the control panel in this fashion. It doesn't take that long. This is one of the biggest objections that I hear all the time, and it's baffling in a way. Even owners of a company will say, well, it just takes too long to complete the checklist. It doesn't take that long. It really doesn't. And if it's important enough, then even if it took 5 minutes, then that's important enough. So gauge whether it's important or enough. If you're saying it's too much time, 5 minutes is too much time, even if someone logs in with their phone and is clicking it off, 2 minutes is too much time, well, then you don't really need a checklist. I don't think you need the checklist that bad enough. Or you don't understand the bigger picture of how it could help. So really consider all the dynamics of when you build a checklist and requiring your employees to fill it out. If you're not going to require them to do it, if you're not going to make it an actual business job duty for them to fill that checklist out, if you're just going to not make it mandatory, then don't do the checklist. Okay, don't have checklists, because if you build a checklist and then you ask your people to fill it out, but then you're not really going to require them to do it, then you're defeating the purpose of not only having processes, but definitely checklists. So make sure you're committed to it. All managers have to do is be willing to look to make sure that they're done. That's it. And that's pretty easy. So once a week, they can go to the reports tool, go here under management review, put in the date range right here. So whatever date range, if it's a week or a day or a month, you can even search by user right here. So the person themselves. And then when you hit run report, it's going to give you a list of everything that Mary did. Now, I didn't put a date range in, so this is enormous. But if I just put that week in, I would see all the checklists here. And that's pretty easy. I'll go at the end of the week and run a report for that week for everyone that I have management review for. And I just look to see if the checklists are there. Are they there for everyone? Yes? Okay. If Mary missed hers, then I'll go back to her and say, where's your checklist? I don't see it for Monday. I don't see it for Tuesday. I don't have to do that anymore. And you only have to do it a couple times. They just have to know that you're watching and you're looking for it. So this is like the ongoing management of the checklist. Now, when there's a problem or I need statistics or I am dealing with a customer that says certain things weren't done, I'm dealing with an employee who says certain things weren't done, or one department to another where they're saying we didn't get that information. My manager is saying, where's that report? And somebody told me they didn't, but they did. I'll go back to the checklist and then look. And then it becomes a really great management tool because you can see whether it was done or not. You can catch people when they're just marking things off for marking's sake. But that's, about the ongoing management of it. So the final word about checklists, let's go back here for a second, is think about the reason that you have it, make it a good reason, and then manage it. Be willing to look every day and make sure that it's there. Now, one thing I just want to point out about checklists before I let you go is they can be printed too. If you need to print them and have them on a clipboard, this export feature will allow you to print them. But clearly on the dashboard, it's much easier to have these all in an electronic version. They're all checked off and they're saved inside of TouchStone. So next week, we're going to talk about the rest of the process tools. So we'll go through scripts, uploaded files, and so on, and I'll again talk about technically how to use all these tools, but then why you use them and how you use them. Also next week, since we'll have more time, I'm going to be highlighting the customer satisfaction process. So this is a library process that you can all download. It goes with the theme of customer complaints, which we'll be talking about for the second week or the second session next week. So I'm going to talk about this library process, why it's important, when to use it, how to use it, and that will all be next week. Thanks for coming, everybody. Bye-bye.